Hey guys, thanks so much for joining me on a Saturday night at 7 o'clock. I have something really special tonight, which is a little different than what you guys have been seeing out of my videos recently. But I have a friend who I met a few years ago, and she is the author of this book, which is Spanking City Hall, Dominatrix to Political Activist. And so I want to thank Melyssa for being here with us tonight. Hi, Melyssa.
Hi.
Hi. So I want to talk about your book because I read this book, obviously, and it is like a fascinating read. It is a really fascinating story. Your life is fascinating. So let's just start at the beginning. Tell people the beginning of the story, and then we'll roll in the tea party and everything like that as we go along.
Well, the beginning of the story would start with me being a dominatrix. It was kind of, I'd been an account executive, and the book really goes into the detail, but long story short, God pushed me into a dungeon. God wanted me to go down there for a while. And I needed to learn some lessons. It was like, a university to me, or a studio. And the main thing that I learned were subjects about particularly dominance and submission. And, with all this talk about sexual harassment and everything, it's not sexual harassment if the woman consents. And it's not sexually harassing for a guy to say to a woman, hey, you look really great, or something like that. But if she says no to his advances, he just has to go away. No means no. So they're allowed to say something once. And without touching you,
or whip, ripping your pants off and exposing yourself.
Right. So, but anyway, what had happened was, I was practicing for a few years, and in '03 I was doxxed on AOL. All of my info was put out there with this crazy woman. Another dom. She got angry because she wanted to go into business with me. I didn't want anything to do with her because she was crazy. And I told her no. And the next thing I know, there's whole gang of dominatrices ganged up on me and outed me to the media. Now, all of the media ignored it. They wrote this crazy press release, which is in my book, about how, there's a transgendered woman running down the street in the snow in her high heels, bloody, like crazy stories like that. Not even true. And they sent it to all of the media outlets, the prosecutor in Indianapolis, the sheriff's office, anything that they could find on the internet to send this crazy press release to.
So this was 2003.
In '03. Yes.
So this was like way in the beginning of your sort of escapade, yes. I guess you could say. So how did you get through that? Like, so you're a dominatrix, and then there are other dominatrixes that are angry because you don't want to work with them, but you were very successful as a dominatrix, correct?
Yeah, pretty successful. Yeah. I would have made a lot more money if I would have done sex for hire, because there are some doms that do. But I would never do that. In my view, it was like, first of all, I'm not going to break the law for you. And secondly, if I do what you tell me to do, that makes me your sub.
Yeah. Well, let's try and just very as PG as possible break down what exactly it is that a dominatrix does so that people understand before we move forward.
Well, a dominatrix takes control in a role-playing type scene. And that role-playing could be anything from 24/7, 365 to a half an hour, 5 minutes. There's no set time. It's just really what the two people decide that they want. So one person gives up control to the other. But the person that gives up control chooses who they give that control to, and they set their limits. So, a common limit is, especially among novices, which is mostly what I worked with, would be don't leave any marks on me. So, I could do anything I wanted, but not leave any marks on him. So I would have to work within their limits. So anyway, this gaggle of women on AOL outed me, doxed me in '03, and all of the media stations ignored it except one. Channel 6 News ran with it. And it was sweeps week. So they literally used me for ratings. And
wow.
And I'm an advertising account executive now. And I look back at that and go, they didn't even give me a commission. Like, I really did probably up their ratings a lot. So what they did is they ran this promo for a week, that there was this dominatrix in Meridian Kessler neighborhood. And my neighborhood's where the governor's mansion is. So you can imagine classic 1920s neighborhood, Tudors, mansions, craftsmen. It's a beautiful neighborhood and prominent in the city. So, this was big news in '03 on TV. So they outed me. But God had a purpose for that. And looking back, I understand it now. The time I was scared, but, it was so that I could start to learn how to work with the media and understand how they worked. It gave me some practice with the media.
I'd say. So you continued down, in that sort of a profession, I guess you could say, until when?
Yeah, well, in that round with the media, basically they were trying to get me on something. So they'd go around and interview all these cops, and they're like, yeah, we know about her. We checked her out. She's not breaking any laws, and she's got a legal right to do what she's doing. I was like, great. It spooked all my clients. So I just kind of shut down for 6 months and did some renovations on the house and just sort of chilled. And then 2 years later, though, it was these doms on the internet again. And by the way, they're all liberals. Does that surprise you?
Yes. No, it doesn't surprise me at all. And I guess that, you're a more libertarian leaning conservative. We'll just get that out right now. Yeah. Right. So,
I mean, I'm not going to be, but I'm a Christian too. God works with people in very interesting ways. You would not think that he would have one be a dominatrix, but that's how it was. And anyway, so when, these serious allegations against me came 2 years later, I'd had a little bit of media experience, to be able to deal with it. So, and that's when Mayor Peterson in Indianapolis, he needed a photo op. And I got on his radar, and they sent a vice cop in to investigate me. They had every right to investigate any business, I think. I don't have a problem with that. But that cop, he came to me as a client, and I was, treated him like everybody else. You have to do an interview. It's $100 for an interview. And then we determine, if a session makes sense. Well, he was propositioning me for sex in the upfront interview. And I kept telling him no. And I told him, I said, look, this isn't for you. I'm keeping your $100, but you don't need to spend any more money with me. And that's when he said, well, I just want to learn. And I was this archetype of a dominatrix called a maîtresse, which is French for teacher. And I felt a moral obligation to teach someone that asked to learn. And that's why I took his session.
But you still didn't do anything illegal.
Nope. So he shows up 2 days later for his session, and he starts sexually harassing me and propositioning me for sex again. I mean, this man asked me for sex probably 50 to 100 times. I mean, it was just constant. And literally, that's the equivalent of the taxpayers of Indianapolis paying to send an agent into my place of business with the sole purpose of sexually harassing me. Think about that.
So when he left, what ended up happening?
Well, the session I talk about in the first chapter of my book, because he would not stop harassing me, I turned him into the slut and whore he wanted me to be and asked him how it felt. And doing that was within his limits that he had consented to. So that's how you take control in a session. They give you, their limits, and then you do what you want. My job wasn't to submit to him and his money. My job was to give him a forum in which he could submit to me. that make sense?
Yeah, of course. They were just trying to basically set you up, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So
then 6 weeks later, old Jack Reinhardt of Channel 6 News shows up on my front porch again with a cameraman. And rolling right behind him is the sheriff. They have a lawsuit to serve me with for a zoning infraction. $2,500, like a really expensive parking ticket. So I also found out the next day the city was planning a press conference. Now, when have you ever heard of the city holding a full court presser with all the TV trucks, a podium, a microphone, all the public officials for a home-based business zoning violation?
never.
Well, you've heard of it now. So I heard about this presser. The Channel 6 guy wouldn't tell me where it was. So I got on the phone with people I knew in media from 2 years earlier and started asking them, well, where's this presser going to be? Because I put on, you know, my coat and a hat. It was December 1st, 05, and I marched down there, and the mayor thought I was part of the media. How about that? And he called on me.
He called on you for a question. What'd you ask?
Yes. I was the first or second person. I said, do any of her businesses meet the legal definition of adult? Because they were calling it an adult, you know, sex business. And I knew the laws better than the city attorney did. And somebody nudged him and said, you know, we're only taking questions from the press. And then the press all of a sudden was like, what's going on here? So then one of the members of the press asked the same question, and he turned it over to the city attorney. And you've heard this before from City Hall. Well, this is kind of how she talked. Yeah, this isn't what the Historic Preservation Council had in mind when it was la 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 and the children, you know, and she's throwing it all in there. It was hilarious, though scary at the time. And that's when it was on. I knew I had to fight them. And so over the next 20 months was when I was litigating with the city in both the media and the courts. They had me on the front page of the paper and all the news stations as the town whore, of course. And I was like, I'm taking this mayor out. I'm like, if he's lying about me, what else is he lying about? And he was a Democrat mayor, of course. So back in those days, there wasn't really social media like there is today. So I got on the blogs. And there were, fortunately, in Indianapolis, a lot of political blogs written by lawyers. And they have good followings, lots of comments, lots of anonymous comments. And you know how you can just read through comments and the ones that just ring true and they're not written by crazy people. And you know, hey, that's an inside whistleblower. That's somebody inside that's going to get fired if they talk about it publicly. So they're sneaking around on the blogs and writing anonymous comments about what's going on in City Hall and the state capitol, right?
Okay, so this was like the Reddit of Indianapolis politics, basically.
Yeah, it was different blogs. Advance Indiana was a big one. Indy Undercover was one that was written by, you know, this supposed cop who went by Joe Friday. You know, like just some of the blogs were anonymous, some of them weren't. But anyway, so that's where I got my political education. And I went in there, like I kind of viewed City Hall like a soap opera. You know, and if you've ever watched a soap opera back in the day, you have to watch that thing for a year before you know everybody and what's going on in the backstories. So I would spend 20, 30 hours a week just studying the blogs back then.
So you basically had all the ammunition that you needed from these blogs to be able to kind of put in your toolkit for what was to come.
I just had to find it. I knew if he was lying about me, he was lying about a lot of other things. Now, taking a powerful two-term mayor out of office is not an easy thing, especially when they've got a $3 million war chest. And back then that was more money than it is now. So anyway, so So by the time we get to, early '07, there's property tax thing is in the blogs all the time, and people aren't going to be able to pay their bills, and the commenters are just going crazy with it. But the TV news was going, well, the state government legislature and the governor has ordered a reassessment of all the properties, and yada yada, and they're not predicting that it's going to be any big deal. And
so explain to me before we go on so people understand this. What's the neighborhood that this is going on like in terms of income? Or is it middle class, middle upper class, a lot of rich people, a mix?
It's a mix. It's a classic 1920s neighborhood, the first suburb of Indianapolis. Tudors, mansions, craftsman homes. There's doubles, there's apartments, but it's just kind of classic and old and beautiful. There are a lot of very, very wealthy people in my neighborhood. And, there's people that, I have a friend that just works as a painter and she lives in the neighborhood. There's just all kinds of folks, nurses, you name it, it lives here. And it's a huge neighborhood. And in the center is the governor's mansion. The governor's mansion's on this big street called Meridian Street, runs right through the center of the city. And both sides of the street are flanked with mansions and huge park-sized lots. It's one of the most beautiful streets in America.
So they start saying they're going to reassess everybody's property, and
right.
the property taxes are going to skyrocket. And there was obviously a revenue shortage in the city, which is why they needed to do this.
Yeah, well, actually, there was a revenue shortage statewide caused by the sunsetting of a business inventory tax. So that was the trigger. So the government has been kicking a property tax can down the road for decades. And then there was a lot of pressure from the business community to sunset this egregious business inventory tax. So they did that, but they had no plan to make up that revenue or to cut spending. You have to do one or the other. So there was this budget shortfall, and they decided to put it on to the homeowners. And here's the thing that we learned too, that a lot of people don't know. Our houses are used as collateral by the government. Did you know that?
I did, yes, I did.
Okay, yeah, that's how they go to the bond bank. But I didn't know that. We found that out that year. Like, none of us knew it, but anyway.
You never even own the property that you own ever either. So
no. We one of the things we did in the property tax, revolts that we staged, that basically was the basis for the Indiana Tea Party and the Tea Party, and we were called teabaggers. So, if anyone wants to say I didn't, found this movement, I was the first human, I think, in this country to be called a teabagger.
So before we get into, let's start. So you find out about the property taxes and you say, oh my gosh, we have to do something about this because this is insane. And what do you do next?
Oh, well, I have been volunteering with the fair tax. And I like to throw parties. And I kind of always wanted to figure out some way to get the fair tax into the media so it'd be on all the TV channels, like what they did to me. I wanted to do it for the fair tax. So when this property tax crisis came along, and I started looking up what everyone's bills were going to be before they got their bills, I was like, holy cow, no one's going to be able to pay this. There was one house on my street, their bill went up $1,000 a month. Went up $1,000 a month. How would you like to get a brand new bill, Tracy, out of nowhere for $1,000 every month forever that you had to pay?
That's $12,000 a year. That's probably more than most people's mortgages on top of what they were paying previously. So that's a lot of money for one person, for one household.
Yeah, well, that's what they were doing. And also in the neighborhood, because they're older houses, there were people whose mortgages have long been paid off. And that's been their home for 30 or 40 years. Then all of a sudden they get this brand new bill. They're on fixed incomes. Where's that money come from? So they were really, my anger and my motivation was very highly driven by the seniors in my neighborhood and worrying about in their later years, you know, I wanted to protect them. So that was part of it, because I was younger and had energy and kind of had an idea. So my idea was that, you know, I would ride on a bicycle with a bunch of other fair tax, you know, volunteers, and we would be like a posse and go from house to house with flyers and warn people about their bills that were going to show up in 2 days and that we had a solution, and come to the governor's mansion and rally, and we're going to present the solution and we're going to give it to the governor.
So there's really no social media, though, for you to get the word out about this. There's no Facebook. There's no, you know, whatever. This is like kind of really an organic, like knock on doors type thing.
Yeah, but I never knocked on a door because I don't like my door knocked on. So I would only approach people if they were in their yard. That was the rule. So I just basically cruised all the streets on my bike for 10 hours. And if you were on the sidewalk or in your yard, you were at fair game.
Did anybody recognize you from years past by chance?
No, no one did. But you know what I did do? I had been working at that point at Angie's List for a year. I did wear my Angie's List t-shirt because that company is headquartered in Indianapolis. And, you know, we're kind of known as the good guys. And so I knew that psychologically, if they saw a girl ride up with an Angie's List t-shirt on, they'd talk to me.
Okay, so you flyer, you talk to everybody outside, you know, you do what you have to do. And then what day? It was the next day, right? Or 2 days later, you were expecting to have this sort of rally?
On Sunday, I did the bike ride. Oh, no. Oh, here, this is another important part too. Like, no one showed up to go on this bike ride with me. I had borrowed 5 bicycles and they were all in my foyer. And there was nobody that showed up. They would call and they all just had one lame excuse after another. And I know what it was. They thought it was a dumb idea and it would never work. And because they didn't show up, I started thinking it was a dumb idea and it would never work. And I was just like, I'm going to look so stupid. What if no one comes? You know, all the normal things that go through your head. And then God spoke to me again. And God said, no, this is bigger than you. See it through. And then I had on the bike.
So off you go on your Angie's List t-shirt. You know, cruising around the neighborhood, basically talking to everyone you can. And then the fateful day comes and you're like, I might be standing here all by myself. And where were you? You were outside the governor's mansion, right?
Yeah, but what happened in the interim? Okay, you have to remember, I was politically naive when I was thrown into the media by the mayor. So, and although I'd been studying political blogs for, you know, over a year, I still didn't really understand all the, you know, like I wasn't like how you and I are today. We really understand government, what's going on. But back then I was very naive. I was barely woke. And so I needed help. Well, the former state chair of the Libertarian Party, Mark Rutherford, I call him the Godfather. He's a great guy. And he was in the background making phone calls to help. And he got 2 guys involved. Andrew Horning, who is a constitutional scholar, an expert, both the Indiana and U.S. Constitution, and one of the fair tax directors, Sean Shepard. So those guys came and ran the first event. They really ran all the events. I would just basically do the hugging, the cheerleading, the organizing, the flyer making, the distribution, the media. Like I did all the PR part. They did the actual boots on the ground at the rallies. They were talking and leading the discussion and the conversation, and then I would just take talking points from them. I was like the press secretary, but I also founded it. It was like my idea, and I made sure it happened.
Got it. So you end up showing up and they come with you, and there are lots of other people that decide to come too.
Yeah, there were, because when I was doing the bike ride, I told my neighbors, I said, they kind of looked at me crazy at first, and I said, oh, no. In 2 days, you're going to have these bills. You're going to open this thing and you're not going to be able to pay it. Do not lose this flyer. I was like, don't lose this flyer. And please get on your computer right now and email everybody you know. That was my message, basically. And they took me seriously because there were 500 people there at least. And it closed down the street. And I didn't pull a permit. I never pulled a permit for anything. Because I kind of thought, why do I ask? Because I'm like, I'm the dominant. The government's my submissive. That's my attitude. And it's authored. I mean, I don't just take that. It's authored that way. We're the dom, they're the sub. The problem is that people don't act like the dom, right?
Yes, I always say we're the ones in charge. You guys forget they work for us. Absolutely. They work for us, literally. So, yeah.
So one of the other things that I learned in the dungeon was, of course, how to teach dominance and submission. So I had to teach it to my neighbors. And by the way, they didn't care that I was a dominatrix. So there's all these conservatives, you know, the Democrats are the ones calling me the C word and the slut and the bitch and the whore and the prostitute and every filthy foul name you can think of. Meanwhile, the Republicans and the libertarians are hugging me, not judging me, embracing me, like no judgment from them. How about that?
Not surprising.
I know. But yeah. And then of course, you know, it wasn't long after the Tea Party got going. And basically we ran events nonstop for 4 months.
Well, tell that story though. Tell the story and what was the outcry? I want to know a couple of things. I want to know what did the governor do, or what did anybody do while you guys are all out there basically protesting this ridiculous property tax hike that's going to put everyone in the poorhouse? And how did the whole Tea Party thing start?
Oh, good question. Okay, well, the Tea Party started because at the first rally on the 4th of July, you know at these protests, there's always the crotchety, old, grouchy man that hates the government.
Yes.
Okay, you know, one of those guys, love him. He screamed, "We need a tea party." And he kind of had me at party. I didn't know what one should look like, but I'm like, I'm throwing tea parties. That's what we're going to call this thing. So, I mean, the idea didn't come out of my head. I got it out of the ether and I ran with it.
So you guys started calling yourself the Tea Party movement, you know, the Tea Party in Indianapolis. And you have actually, like, this is something you're very adamant about. So I want to go over it really quickly because on Twitter, I had posted and said, you know, the founder of the Tea Party. And being from the Ron Paul kind of revolution myself, I remember us doing this in the same sort of time period, but you have diligently researched to find another organized Tea Party group anywhere in the country before yours, right?
I have done, and I ask people to bring me evidence, okay? I've got everything that we did really documented, and I do believe that there were very small, like kind of Tea Party type things popping up, little tiny storms. But we were a huge one that got a little national media. And by national media, I mean, we had several pieces in the Chicago Tribune, and they also did, like, I think it was like a 2-page spread in the LA Times. I have no idea why the LA Times called me and wanted to interview.
So you got how big? How big did you get? Like, how many people were in your at the peak? How many people did you have?
We were enough to cause the biggest election upset in Indiana history.
Okay, so this is like basically the beginning of how the sort of Make America Great Again MAGA thing started. Like, it's almost the same drain the swamp, get rid of the trash, you know, we're done with the establishment sort of thing, but in your neighborhood. So I don't want to skip over, like,
it was statewide, because I took the Tea Party around to anybody in the state that wanted to have their own Tea Party. I would bring the tea bag to them, and, you know, we would, you know, bring bring some people from the Capitol to kind of come and join their little tea party, and we would do it anywhere in the state. Somebody, if they wrote to me and wanted to have one, I would make it happen.
So who called you a teabagger?
Her name is Jen Wagner. I know that you have a bunch of citizen journalists that listen to this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Jen Wagner. She was the communications director for the Indiana Democratic Party. And she was in 07. She now runs a PR firm on Mass Avenue downtown. And I forget what the PR firm name is. And she was always very snarky to me. But she coined the word bagger.
Does she know what that actually means, or did she just decide that she was going to?
Oh, she knew. I didn't know what it meant, though. I was a dominatrix, or had been a dominatrix, and I didn't know what that word meant. I had to, like, look it up. I didn't know. And I was like, holy cow, this is the most derogatory thing ever. And if you remember, in 2016, we were called deplorables. So It was teabaggers back then, and then we became deplorable. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you guys were actually, did you stop the property tax hike?
Yes. So you asked about the governor. Honestly, we would not have had the successes we did without Governor Daniels, who I hold immense respect for. A lot of people wanted him to run for president too. He turned our state around, let me tell you. First of all, most of the politicians and the lobbyists and everything would laugh at us and denigrate us. Not Governor Daniels. He always treated us with the utmost respect. He listened, he cared, he really saw his role as a public servant. And he was a top-notch executive. And he understood the orchestrations of government very well too. So he's the one, we pushed really, really hard for repeal. So you know, just like Trump knows, when you're negotiating, you don't start your negotiation with the compromise in the middle, or you will lose, right? Mm-hmm. You start with the full out, like we were so far right on this. We were like full out repeal. We will accept nothing short of full out repeal, and we will not stop until you completely repeal our property taxes and replace it with something else, or cut the spending, one or the other. And because we were so adamant, we got a really good fix. It took 2 legislative sessions and a referendum, and Governor Daniels steered it. But they opened the Indiana Constitution and put an amendment in there that permanently capped property tax at 1%, which is huge. That stabilized Indiana's economy. You can come here and buy a house and be able to, you're not going to be blindsided with your property tax. You know, you can, if it gets too high, if your house becomes worth too much, I guess you could get a different house to bring it down, but you have a little bit more control because you know what your tax is going to be. That in turn, we have the strongest economy in the Midwest now because of that. Oh, we're an engine. We really are. And if you might recall too, that Governor Pence is from Indiana.
I do recall that, actually.
Governor Mike Pence is from Indiana. Yeah. So, but he wasn't living at the governor's mansion when we had the thing, but he's very aware of the Tea Party and those days. He was a congressman at the time. And because I was learning about all of our politicians, the big thing I learned about Mike Pence about a year or so later during the bailouts, Mike Pence was the first guy to stand up to those banksters. Do you remember that?
I do. Yes. That's one of the only things that I loved about him when Trump picked him.
So, okay. Yeah. I know, but it was brave. It was so brave. I mean, there was a line in the sand and he crossed it very bravely and alone.
Principle's very important. Yeah. Principle's very important. Yeah. So at least he has that going for him. I'm a little on the fence about Pence. Actually, I'm very on the fence about him. So
I have my, let's just put it this way. Regarding him, my eyes are always open.
Yeah. Absolutely. So you guys are successful with this property tax thing, and then you're not finished yet.
Yeah,
So what
well,
next?
and actually, so far, this tax cut, and this is a part I'm like so proud about. When my bill is mailed to me, there is a line item that shows the savings due to the 1% cap. And it feels so good inside to know that that arrives in every single house in Indiana, their savings because of that. And it's been billions now. It's, well, let's see, 7 years, pushing $4 billion probably now. And
So who got angry with you about that?
who got angry with me?
Yeah, somebody was angry that you guys were able to affect change like that. So who was it?
Like the Democrats, mostly. Yeah, I mean, there's certain little pesky Democrat trolls that hate me. The homeowners, of course, they liked it. And also in that movement, we were able to get this new mayor in office. This was extraordinary. There was this guy, Ballard. No one had heard of him 4 months before the election. He started showing up to our Tea Party events. We got to know him. We liked him. We rallied around him. He had $50,000 and ended up raising $250,000. That's it. Mayor Peterson went into this with $3 million. So $250K beat $3 million. No one knew Ballard's name 4 months out. We literally put an unknown in. Oh, and also Ballard did not have the backing of his own party. They had cut a deal behind the scenes with the Democrats about who was going to control the mayor's office and who was going to control city council. We flipped city council too. So the Tea Party has a pretty good little start to it, didn't it?
Yeah, I'd say. I mean, I don't think that if you think about this in perspective, what you're saying is absolutely incredible. And it goes to show that, as much as we think we may be powerless to do anything to change this nonsense, right, we're really not. And, even outside of the normal political means that we may move forward in, that's not always what does it either. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's people. And if it did your past come back to haunt you at all through this process?
Yeah, I mean, on the blogs by the Democrats, I was constantly, berated as a whore. Okay. Even though I broke no laws. So they always did that. And then, in public, a few times whore and slut was yelled at me, that kind of thing. So they would do that in public. They say that they're for women's rights and not being harassed and all of that, but that's all a lie. They don't respect women. If you respected women, you would not slut shame them, right?
No, I agree. Yeah. I mean, it's the contradiction it's always a contradiction. So yeah, absolutely.
But the Republicans, they were cool with me. There was this one, that was a kind of a churchy lawyer guy, really, good lawyer. And he kind of kept me at arm's length, but he wasn't talking trash about me publicly. I mean, in his own mind, he judged me, but he wasn't judging me to other people. So,
which is, I mean, I guess if you're going to judge anyone, I guess that's the best way to do it.
Kind of, I mean, I knew that it was going on, but he wasn't in media saying things about me or anything like that. So, and he's since passed on, and he was a good man. I don't hold any ill will toward him at all. So, but all in all, it was just really good people in Indiana got this whole thing rolling down the road. But then the hijacking happened.
So explain that part of it.
Yeah. So, well, we had great success in Indiana. basically to just kind of summarize what our successes were, we got a guy into office who biggest election upset in state history. Like even his own party was conspiring behind the scenes against him. Okay. And he had no money or anything. I mean, literally grassroots put him in office. So we got that done. We overturned city council. We got a property tax cap put into place. Oh, and one other thing. We gave cover to the governor, to Governor Daniels. I just love him, but he slashed state spending by 10%. Oh yeah.
So that's a lot of accomplishments in a short period of time.
That's a lot of dough. A whole lot of dough.
I'd say, and then the opportunists came along because they saw how successful you guys were. Just like every other successful organic grassroots movement, it was basically co-opted by establishment.
About the conspiracy behind it.
Okay.
So, Indianapolis is 3 hours from Chicago, right?
Yes.
Yeah, just right up I-65, straight shot. And anyway, and when I won the country's first Tea Party prize from the Sam Adams Alliance, I had to go to Chicago to accept the award. And I didn't do this because there was a prize. I didn't find out about the prize until after we had won. In fact, when I read about it on the internet, I looked at it and I was like, holy cow, I already won that. I just need to tell them. That was my attitude. So everybody wrote them letters and just pushed this so that I would win that prize. And it was $5,000.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it was a substantial prize. But the night of the event, when they gave me the money, there was a person there that was being persecuted for their First Amendment rights, and they had a lot of legal bills. So I gave them 10% of my prize, like a tithe, and then I had to pay taxes on the money, and then I took most of the rest of the money and put on a great big party, everything party for the activists, and that's how I spent the money.
That's awesome.
So I don't ever want to be accused of like profiteering off of this. I think I deserve to get to profiteer off of my book, but, I would love for the book to be optioned one day for a screen treatment for film, because it would make a fantastic movie. And there's a lot of content, I would like to say, that is not in the book that I have. I'm literally sitting on mountains of documentation. I know where everything is from the founding of this. But let's go forward to the hijacking. The hijacking, we call CNN fake news, Rick Santelli, right?
Yes.
The Chicago Stock Exchange floor, right?
Okay.
His meltdown calling for the Tea Party. Remember that? During the bailouts. Remember?
I do. I'm sorry, I had a sound thing.
Okay. So, and now with what I know about CNN, and I'm looking back on that was Rick Santelli's CNN Chicago, 3 hours up the road from us. The Chicago Tribune was reporting on our Tea Party all the time. They knew what was going on, right? And I won.
Oh, interesting.
There. Oh, yeah. So he calls for this. Me, little old naive me down here in Indianapolis. Oh, I was so excited. I'm like, finally, this is going to take off. We're going to have national coverage. This is going to get really big, and we're going to do all over the country what we did in Indiana. I was so happy. So I'm on Facebook by this time. By this time, I had a Facebook account. And I'm trying to track down these operatives in Chicago. And I wish I had saved screenshots and everything. I didn't know it was that big of a deal at the time. But I identified the guys that were wrestling this thing. And I said, hey, guys, I led that Tea Party down here. I've got everybody's emails. I know what's going on. I want to lead the Indiana faction, okay? And they're like, well, we don't really know exactly everything that's going on yet. We'll let you know. So they were keeping me at arm's length, okay? Meanwhile, I'm like just a racehorse. You know, I want to get this done. They're keeping me at arm's length. The next thing I know, they put this plumber in charge. Attaboy Plumbing in Indianapolis. I looked him up on Angie's List. He had reviews in there where he had physically threatened women. They're writing their reviews of him coming to the house with plumbing, and there was like some bill dispute or something, and he's physically threatening them. And there was more than one review like that.
So this guy's leading this supposed Tea Party now.
Yeah, they didn't even check him out on Angie's List. I mean, come on. And I mean, maybe they would have had to have bought a membership to Angie's List back then, but who cares? You have to research people when they're doing this, you know, whatever. So yeah, they put that guy in charge and they hijacked it from me. And I wrote about that at the time too. I was very, very, very angry about it. But
I felt the same way when they hijacked the Ron Paul movement and tried to turn them into Republicans. It was the same thing. No, it was the whole country. It was basically they turned us into Republicans, and it was all Rand Paul and Ron Paul, because Rand Paul was going to run for president. So they wanted us to all be, you know, Republican, but we were like, So they started calling us the Ragamuffins. It's a long story, whatever. Anyway, but it's the same thing. They took our movement away from us, and it's really sad.
Yeah, they pulled the same dirty tricks that they pulled on Bernie with Ron Paul.
Yes.
Yeah, but you know, we got a really good philosophical grounding from Ron Paul. Ron Paul really brought a lot of people together nationally. You know, the whole spirit of this thing just grew and grew and grew and grew. And it became MAGA in 2016. It really did. And I knew because of the Tea Party and the experience that I'd been through before, and I started seeing earmarks in 2016 that were perfectly mirroring what happened in 2007. And I'm like, Trump's going to win this whole thing. I could just see it. Mm-hmm. And I was in a unique position that I could, because I had been in the inside of the Tea Party founding, but I had no doubts that whole year, that even before the primary, that Trump was going to take the whole thing. And here's an interesting thing. The first state to call it for Trump was Indiana. How about that?
Oh, that's awesome. That's great.
That made me very happy
too. Because
yeah. So
awesome. We have about 10 more minutes. So I just want to get into what made you write this book and then how people can get it. Because before we even do that, I read this book. Literally, I started it and finished it in a night. And it's a really fast read, but it's not. It's like a political 50 Shades of Grey, if you're interested in something like that. It's really, really interesting. And it's a fantastic book. I couldn't.
Yeah, show them the typesetting inside so they can see how, like, the font is so easy to read.
Yeah, it's really a really good book. It's let me see, 262 pages. And it's just enthralling. Like, honestly, I'm not just saying that. It's really, really good. I loved it. I really did. But what made you want to write this book?
Well, I knew it. I knew that I had won. You know, I went from being this persecuted dominatrix, slut shamed and sexually harassed, dragged through the media in my town like a whore, to winning everything. Like, literally winning everything against all odds. You would not think you would go from that position of having all of your power stripped from you to, like, winning all of that. It was amazing. And I knew that it had to be a book. And also, I'm very alpha. So I'm like, winners write the history. So I went to the Indianapolis Business Journal, which are the only real journalists in Indianapolis. And I went to them with the project. They were super interested. And they, and they're like beautiful people there, very just, a lot of journalistic integrity, let's put it that way. And they had this book publishing arm, and I went to them and started talking with them, and they're like, we want to steer you through this entire project so that it's done right. And we assembled a team of editors, a creative director, a literary consultant who did my rewrite. The reason it reads so well is that I brought a consultant in to rework the original manuscript that I gave her. And I did the original manuscript with my editor, John Housen, and he came to my house every day for, about 4 months or so to write the book. And we would juice in the morning and storyboard everything and write it. And in the process of that is when I understood that I had gone through the hero's journey. And then when I started researching, Hollywood blockbusters and that kind of thing, they all go through that hero's journey. The best stories do. The top grossing films, that's what they all have in common. And then, I started to realize, oh, and this is a true story. And, so that's one of the things they look for is true stories, the hero's journey. They like to know that there's clear rights to the story. And I knew that I had all those components. I didn't want to write a screenplay. I wanted to write like a book. I don't know anything about screenplay writing, but it worked out. And I took 1.5 years off work and kind of chilled. And it was the best 1.5 years of my life when I was writing that book. And then I launched it and I went back to work. And God told me to write it, and I don't know what's going to become of it, but I do think that there is a void in the entertainment world for a juicy conservative story, and I think I'm the one that's got it.
It's the interview that we did today is awesome, but and it tells the story, and it tells the story really well, but the book, it just like hooks you in. It's a really, really well done book. And, I just loved it. Like I always wanted to sit down with you and do this kind of a thing with you. So I'm really glad that we got to do it tonight. And I know that it's a holiday thing now. So we're around the holidays. And how do people get this if they want to buy it?
It's real easy. It is on Amazon, but I would not let Amazon have my hardbacks because I just don't like Amazon. I don't think that they're very good to artists. So I distribute the hardbacks myself. They are ordered through Square Up. In the month of December, if you place an order for 1 book plus shipping, I will send you 2 books so that you have a complimentary gift copy, 1 for yourself and 1 for a friend for a Christmas present. And to order them, there's 2 places you can go. You go to @Spank City Hall, not spanking, @Spank City Hall on either Gab, Twitter, or Facebook. Actually, the shopping links are just on Twitter and Facebook. So there's shopping links pinned to the top of my Twitter, and there's also a shopping link on the Facebook @Spank City Hall.
That's awesome. So everybody has to buy this book because I'm telling you, it's really good. I would never have somebody on if I didn't appreciate something they did. So I just wanted to let everyone. No, really, I love it. It's great. And I thank you so much for spending an hour with us tonight and doing this. It was really cool. And I know that we had a little bit of a hubbub going on over in the chat. So I'm interested to go back and read what the heck was going on in there.
I didn't even know about that part.
I don't know. There is a chat. Yeah. And I see it flying by, but I can't read it because I'm paying attention to you, which is exactly what I should be doing. But I'll go back and read it and see what everyone's chatting about in there.
And I want to just send a shout out to you, Trace, because when we first met, we had those great conversations in the beginning, and I know that how passionate you are for liberty, and that you became this burgeoning YouTube star. If you're not even a star already, it's kind of hard for me to tell, but you're doing a great job. I watch your breakdown of Q, and I love how analytical you are, how serious you are about this. I mean, you're taking it very seriously, and you're just a great person in the liberty movement, and I'm so glad that you're one of us.
Blush, blush. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. That's really nice. I'm really bad at
Yeah, I'm just kind of blown away how your channel took off, though. Like, I was just like, oh my gosh, she's like blowing up. And I did the same thing with Laura Loomer, because I've known Laura since 2015 when she was still undercover at Project Veritas. And that girl, she wanted to get in front of the camera so bad. We talked about a lot, and she just finally busted out and did it. And what she's doing is extraordinary too.
There's a lot of people doing a lot of really amazing things, tons of people. And I'm just happy to be able to help anyone that I can help. So
yeah, and we need more, and we need more people. More people.
Yeah, we do. Everybody needs to do this.
Yeah.
We need more loudmouths like me and you. We need more loudmouths.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, Melyssa, thank you so much for being here. And thanks, guys, for sticking out in the chat and hanging out with us tonight. And we'll see you soon.
Night. Bye-bye.
Bye.